All right, everybody, this is the penultimate list. These are the runners up. These are almost my favorite games of all time. This is number 20 through 11 of my top 50 favorite games of all time. Black Orchestra. I'm okay with cooperative games. I like them and I'll play them, but I tend to like competitive games more. But every now and then a game comes along that transcends my normal preferences, and this one, Black Orchestra, does it in spades. This game is just absolutely great. The theme of the game is that you're trying to assassinate Hitler during World War II. You have a team of guys, it's based on real history, a team of guys that really existed in history, and you're trying to collaborate to create a plot that you're going to enact to assassinate Adolf Hitler and change history. This game is chock full of history that is absolutely awesome. If you play with history buffs who have read books or watched documentaries about this whole Project Valkyrie business, it's very accurate. Like a lot of the history of different things that happened in World War II, the different places, the different people went, the people who you're playing are the characters. They get such a kick out of it, seeing all of that actual history sort of playing out in a sort of alternate history kind of way. What I love about it, though, the gameplay is great. It has some of the best collaboration amongst players. It's like you're playing Mission Impossible. You're a team of guys who have to go out and do all these different things and put all the pieces, all the ducks need to be in a row perfectly. You need to be in the right place at the right time with all the right items and enact your plot and assassinate Adolf Hitler with one stand-up dice roll at the end, which normally I would hate. But this game does such a great job of mitigating that dice roll. The whole idea of the game is making sure that you're mitigating the randomness of that final dice roll, keeping all of the different tracks in the right place, get all the right items so that you can make the randomness go from almost impossible down to very likely. And you have to keep backup plans. That's one thing I love. Like, okay, if this plan doesn't work, this other guy's plan is going to go, and this one might not be as surefire as this one, but at least we have something in our back pocket if this goes sideways. This game is terrific. The visuals are beautiful. It's evocative of the era. I just absolutely love Black Orchestra. It's my favorite cooperative game. Twilight Imperium. The word epic is so overused in everything in our lives. Board games, video games, movies, just everything. This cheeseburger I had was epic. It's ridiculous. I reserve that word for games like Twilight Imperium, which is an epic board game to my taste. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of games that people play for an entire weekend or an entire week, or they've been playing for 6 months or whatever. This is, for my taste in board games, this is epic. It takes you almost all day to play this game, and there's so many different races that you can play with different abilities and all kinds of technologies to upgrade and planets to capture and reap the benefits from those. And there's politics and alliance making. And man, I just love the scale of this game. It is like a space opera, fleet combat politics game. This is the one. I really struggled whether I wanted to put Star Trek Ascendancy in front of this one, because I love Star Trek so much and it gives me such a great Star Trek feel. But this one, the gameplay is solid and right on, and it gives you everything that you want in a large scale science fiction, civilization, fleet, combat, war, whatever you want to call it game. Twilight Imperium is one of the best. It is a classic. It's a new classic, really. Twilight Imperium is tops. Age of Sigmar. When I started out in miniatures gaming, I was playing Warhammer Fantasy. That was my very first game. That's the predecessor to Age of Sigmar. And I liked it. I just don't really dig the block troops, the rank and flank style of miniatures games. It's not my jam. So we moved on to like War Machine and some other games. Well, Warhammer Fantasy wasn't doing very well for Games Workshop, so they decided to put it to bed and create a brand new miniatures game in the fantasy setting, which is Age of Sigmar. Now, the entire Warhammer community lost their minds. They were crying and rolling on the floor, throwing tantrums, because they had their game taken away from them, which they didn't. But it's the best thing that Games Workshop could ever have done, because damn, they made this game so much better. And not only that, it made their company explode. It was one of the best decisions they could have ever made for their company. But what's great about this game is it's a great game to get started in miniatures gaming, because like Warhammer 40K, there's a lot of management of, you know, your units and picking the right models for your units, and you can swap out guns, and there's a lot of options, and it gets very tedious for new players. Age of Sigmar does not have that. Age of Sigmar has, you buy a unit and it has its abilities, and you put them on the field and it always has those abilities. Now, the depth comes in with how you put those together and how you utilize those abilities on the battlefield. When you're fighting your opponents, what units do you pick to go up against different opponents and different units? It's easy to get into, but it's very, 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 very difficult to master. And that, I think, is one of the hallmarks of a great game. Like Magic the Gathering in my last list, it's dirt easy to play. I mean, there's no rules. You just get in there and you learn these like 10 rules and you're good to go. Same thing with Age of Sigmar. So easy to get into, but really, really difficult to master. And the models are gorgeous. The gameplay is great. They've done so many good things with taking a system that was kind of old and antiquated and making it something new and really, really modern and well done. Age of Sigmar, great game. Onward to Venus. Again with Martin Wallace, my favorite game designer of all time. And this is one of his lesser known, sort of under the radar games that I picked up solely because the theme was so interesting and it was Martin Wallace. It's sort of a Renaissance era, almost steampunk style game where we have figured out how to go into the stars in that era. So it's all this old timey pulp, you know, like turn of the century looking technology that we're going into space with. The board is a whole bunch of planets that are lined up on your table, and you can jump from planet to planet with spaceships and drop your infantry and your tanks down there. You're trying to take control of factories and mines to control them. So there's even big game on some of the planets that you can get victory points for killing it. And basically, the control of the planets isn't military control, it's economic control. So you're trying to control as many factories on the planet as you can. And there isn't much in the way of combat unless there's sort of a tension tile that's on the planet. And I think that's really neat because you have to exploit the board state as best possible to make your moves. You have like maybe 2 or 3 big military moves in the game. Otherwise, you're just kind of trying to backdoor them by coming in and putting down some factories and taking over. This game is very thematic in the components, in the way it plays out. It's just very, very thematic. And it's like almost a war game that's an adventure game mixed in a sense. This game just, there's something about it that I always want to play it. It's just fun for me. The way the mechanics operate, the way the theme rolls out. It's just a game that feels good to me. It's one of my favorite Martin Wallace games. A Touch of Evil. Similar to Fortune and Glory, because they're published by the same publisher, Flying Frog, this game is not perfectly designed. It feels a little old and outdated, but the game is so much fun. This is a terrific colonial era horror game. For some reason, I love colonial era horror. I have no idea why, but I do. I love it. And here's the perfect theme for me. There's so many different monsters. There's vampires, werewolves, banshees, headless horsemen, ghost ships, all different stuff, expansions coming out all over the place with different monsters. And all of these monsters have different abilities and change the way the game is played. You're running around the countryside trying to kill the monsters. And all the while you're visiting locations trying to gear up with muskets and horses and all sorts of different things. And at each one of those locations, there's a deck of cards that is tailored to that location to give you some small adventure while you're there. And so I love that. I love that each deck is tailored to every location. It just feels so thematic. The board is wonderful because it looks like an old-timey map and you're moving around this board and all of a sudden the Headless Horseman pops up and tears through and tries to chop your head off. It's such a great horror adventure game. It's one of those games where, yeah, it's got roll and move in it. Everybody hates roll and move. Why would they ever put that in there in this day and age? I mean, it's not that new of a game, but when they designed this game, it was already a known thing. Don't put roll and move in. I even house rule that out. So one of my favorite games of all time, I house rule a thing that I don't like in it. But the fact of the matter is, I just really enjoy this game. It's such a fun adventure, and adding all of the expansions just like makes the game bigger and richer and more fun with more content. It's a really fun game, despite the fact that it's weird with some of the mechanics. I just enjoy it so much that I can't help but put it on my list. Fury of Dracula. This is another one that I bought many, many years ago, and it's a game that we consistently played a couple of times a year ever since I originally bought it. We love hidden movement, and this one is my favorite hidden movement game. Big map of Europe. One person plays Dracula trying to run away, hide from the hunters, Van Helsing, Mina Hark, or Guldaming, all these different characters from the Dracula book. And they're stalking him. Dracula's leaving traps behind in different cities. He's trying to raise vampires to gain victory points and all this different stuff. And all the while, the players are hunting down. Where are they going to find him? When they finally find him, you go into a battle with him. And he's using all sorts of powers, claws and strength and, turning into mists and all different stuff. This is an exciting game. And the original edition, not original, it was second edition that I had, there was a lot of clunkiness and a lot of bad stuff in it. We had a house rule. We took out some cards because we hated them, but we still loved the game. This new third edition came out from Fantasy Flight. Now WizKids has the rights to do it. They took everything I hated and got rid of it and made sort of the definitive version with all of the bad stuff out and all of the great stuff still there. This new third edition is fantastic. We have so much fun. The deduction is fun. The exciting little story elements that happen as you're watching Dracula run around and he goes to sea and everybody scrambles. Man, this is such a fun game, and the length isn't too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. There's a lot of strategy when you're playing Dracula to try to misdirect. This is such a wonderful mixture of a sort of a pure hidden movement game and sort of an Ameritrashy combat game because you're going in and fighting Dracula then. It melds those two together so wonderfully. I love it so much. Brass. Now you might notice that there are two boxes down here. That means that Brass Lancashire and Brass Birmingham, I'm counting them as one thing in here because Brass is fantastic. And both editions, both of these two different versions of the same game are wonderful, and they serve different purposes. I want to play both. Sometimes I want to play the purer version, Brass. Sometimes I want to play the crunchier version with more junk thrown in. Then I play Birmingham. I jump back and forth between the two because they're both fantastic. Martin Wallace, this is his masterpiece. This is Martin Wallace at his best. I played the original Lancashire version back when it was god-awful ugly and loved it then. But now that Roxley brought out this gorgeous version with the most beautiful artwork you've ever seen, it is just such a treasure to have on the shelf. You're building railroads, you're building canals, you're building industries, you're delivering goods, all sorts of stuff. It's such a deep game. It's not really that terribly complicated, but boy is the depth of strategy there. This is one of the best Euro games ever designed. Classic Martin Wallace masterwork. This is a masterwork of Martin Wallace. I love it to pieces. Gaia Project. Now notice there aren't two boxes down here. Terra Mystica got the boot when Gaia Project came along. I love Terra Mystica. In years past, Terra Mystica would easily be in this spot on my top 50. But once Gaia Project came out and I played Gaia Project, it got the boot. I love that game, but this one is better. It plays almost the same, only all of the things I didn't really care too much about with Terra Mystica got removed. And they added cool stuff. First off, production is fantastic. I love the little space buildings, and the board and the modular board is beautiful, and all the stuff, all the components are great. So they upgraded that immensely. And the graphic design is terrific. But the gameplay is where this game is at. There's such a depth of strategy of trying to terraform all these different planets and get there and build your buildings. And the way that you remove the buildings from your player board and it uncovers what that building yields you now. It's such a clever way of managing that. And there's a delicate balance, right? Because you want to upgrade to a trade house or whatever they call them in this version. So you have to put one back on your player board that covers up some resource, so you're now generating a new resource. It's such an interesting dynamic and a balancing act of how best to do that. And then you're looking at the turn goals that are up at the top, and you're trying to make that happen while making your player board happen, while trying to terraform. There's just so much to this game. It's such a crazy deep and complex game, and I'm just in my element when I'm playing it. I'm not very good at it, but boy, oh, I love it when I'm playing it. And all of the different races are so diverse, even just a little bit of change in their player abilities makes them play completely differently when you're into the game. This game is near perfect. I don't know that I could come up with anything I don't like about this game. Gaia Project is wonderful. Through the Ages. Now, I mentioned that Civilization, the board game, was one of my favorite Civilization games of all time. I even mentioned Through the Ages when I talked about it. Well, the thing is, Civilization, the board game, is probably my favorite Civilization game, ancient history civilization game there ever was. But Through the Ages is a better game. It doesn't feel as much like Civilization because it's just a card game. And that's the only knock I ever had against this game was like, it's hard to get into the theme because of it being so abstract. But once you play it and then play it again and play it again, you start to visualize all these things and the theme does start to come out of it. So you have to push hard to get the theme out of it. But the game is so fantastic. It's another one of those games like Le Havre where it takes forever. Like, it's a long game. But you can really sink your teeth into the strategy, the long-term strategies of this game and how your civilization develops over time. Sometimes you're going military and then you have to shift your focus over to something different like science or technologies or whatever. It's just so much fun to explore this game because there's so much in it. I mean, there's so many cards. You could choke a donkey with the amount of cards that are in this game. And the combinations you can make with those things, it's such it's a vast game, just a vast amount of content in this game. You could buy this game and it would be the only game you buy for the next 10 years. And you probably would be fine because there's so much to this game. And Through the Ages is a game that I don't play nearly enough. And I certainly have not mastered many of the strategies of the game, but boy, do I love it. Fantastic game. Blood Bowl. I actually started off playing Blood Bowl on Steam, the digital version. And then I got a copy of the old version of the miniatures game. And then a new edition just came out a few years ago. And I was so delighted because Blood Bowl is one of the best tactical games you're ever going to play. And what I think is fantastic about this new version is they didn't change almost anything. There might be like one tiny thing in there somewhere. I don't even remember where, but it's pretty much the same exact game that people have been playing for years because it didn't need to be changed. Because this game, though it on the surface seems kind of outdated in the way that there's a lot of randomness in the game. But what you need to understand about Blood Bowl, being that it's a fantasy football game, is that the randomness is the game. It's all about risk management. This game is risk management from beginning to end. There are some very safe things that you can do that'll make progress in the game, but there are some very risky things that you can do that will win you the game, or at least get you a little bit closer to winning the game. But it's such a risky maneuver that you could spoil your entire turn if you do that. And that's what it's all about. It's figuring out how to mitigate that randomness, how to exploit that randomness, and how to manage that randomness. Risk management. Now, a first-time player would come into this game and they would be all freaked out because, you literally can go into your turn. You could try to run the ball. You run past somebody, they knock you down, and your whole turn's over. You didn't even get to move 10 out of your 11 guys because you fell down. That's called a turnover. That's disheartening for a new player. But that's part of the game, is you have to know not to do the things that make that happen, or you have to know which order you have to do things to make sure that if that happens, it happens last. And I got all my easy stuff out of the way. There's just so much to this game. When you get experience with the game, you get much better with the game, and randomness still exists. So it's fun because you could be the best player ever and you could still get screwed by the randomness. But the better players are going to play better. And it's great when you're playing leagues. You could upgrade your characters, give them new skills. You can go game to game with different players in a league format. There's so many different teams with the orcs and the dwarves and the humans and the elves and the chaos and the Nurgle and the goblins. So many different things that you can get in this game. And they even have different pitches you can buy. There's a snow pitch and a dwarf pitch and a Skaven pitch and all different kinds. So you can really customize this game like crazy. It is such a wonderful game. And I really, really wish that more people would try this game out, because boy, it is one of the best games I've ever played. I absolutely love Blood Bowl. All right, everybody, that is the runner-up list. Come on back tomorrow, where I'm gonna give you the definitive, my top 10 favorite games of all time. We'll see you then. Thanks so much, everybody. If you've enjoyed this video, please do us a giant favor by subscribing to the channel and clicking that wacky bell icon. If you're into board games, miniatures games, role-playing games, we have a bunch of audio podcasts you might enjoy. You can find those at thesecretcabal.com or on iTunes and Stitcher.